Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, this is Primetime Asia and I'm Malini Jaini. In tonight's Primetime Asia, Asia-Pacific leaders have wrapped up 2 days of talks in Manila at the annual 21-member Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC gathering. The Philippine government declared a 2-day holiday during the summit, closing schools and public offices and telling people to stay home. Meanwhile, in India and Australia, they have finalized a nuclear deal allowing India to buy Australian uranium. Not far from India, Sri Lanka has been hit by heavy rains, causing flooding and displacing nearly 8,000 people. And China has said that it opposes any country harming its sovereignty in the name of freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea. Kartini Knox has the details.
Asia-Pacific leaders have wrapped up 2 days of talks in Manila that have been overshadowed by an arm wrestle for regional influence between the United States and China. The annual 21-member Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation (APEC) gathering, hosted this year by the Philippines, is meant to forge trade unity, but often finds itself sidetracked by other events. This year, the summit has heard intense rhetoric over the South China Sea, a strategically vital body of water claimed almost in its entirety by China. Smaller nations with overlapping claims are rattled by China's increasing assertiveness in the sea and are looking to Washington for support. China had been hoping that the long-festering territorial dispute would not surface at the trade gathering. But those hopes were dashed when US President Barack Obama flew into Manila and announced more than $250 million in maritime aid for those Southeast Asian allies. He also offered a warship to the Philippines, one of Beijing's most vocal critics in the dispute. Shortly before the trade talks got underway, Obama repeated Washington's demand that China halt any further land reclamation and militarization. Vietnam also signed a strategic partnership this week in Manila with the Philippines, deepening security ties partly in response to China's assertiveness in the sea. President Aquino later led a toast for the continued partnership among APEC leaders to the stability and progress of the Asia-Pacific and to the future that is shaping through APEC. Philippines has set aside 10 billion pesos, or the equivalent of $211.8 million for the country's hosting of the various meetings held throughout the year. APEC, which accounts for 60% of global output and nearly half of the world trade, is aiming for a larger free trade area for its 21 economies by 2025. However, a re-emergence in some states of protectionism as growth stutters could be a hindrance. Security forces are on full alert in Manila during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC leaders meeting in the Philippines capital this week. Regional tensions over the South China Sea and security concerns after the attack by militants on Paris have eclipsed efforts by Pacific Rim leaders this week to boost trade and growth across a region of around 3 billion people. Philippine officials have said there has been no intelligence suggesting a major threat to the Manila summit, which was attended by leaders and representatives from the APEC's 21 member nations, including US President Barack Obama, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Philippine Navy and Coast Guard vessels continue to patrol maritime exclusion zones around meeting venues amid heavy rain. Around 30,000 soldiers and police have been deployed in the Philippine capital to protect the leaders. Philippine authorities have closed several roads and highway lanes for the exclusive use of delegates' vehicles to allow leaders to get to the meeting venues smoothly. Manila residents had complained of the disruption to their lives as the already bad traffic in the city of 12 million ground to a screeching halt on the days leading up to the summit. The Philippine government declared a 2-day holiday during the summit and encouraged people to stay home. Nearly 1,400 domestic and international flights scheduled during the summit week have been cancelled, and schools and public offices have been closed. India and Australia have finalised their nuclear deal, which will make it possible for India to source uranium from Australia. After the first meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the new Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull in Antalya on the sidelines of the G20 summit, the two countries announced the exchange of instruments of ratification. With the completion of procedures, including the administrative arrangements, the India-Australia Civil Nuclear Agreement will enter into force. The Australian Parliament ratified the India-Australia nuclear agreement recently. The two governments exchanged diplomatic missives, called note verbales, on Friday. With this move, India becomes the first country to buy Australian uranium without being a signatory to the International Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology. India currently has nuclear energy agreements with 11 countries and imports uranium from France, Russia and Kazakhstan. In neighbouring Sri Lanka, nearly 8,000 people have been displaced due to floods triggered by heavy rains throughout the country. The country's disaster management centre said over 38,000 people in 10 districts were affected by floods. Heavy rains lashing Sri Lanka with over 150 millimetres of rainfall have caused a number of the reservoirs in the island's north and east regions to overfill, threatening low-lying areas with floods. Sluice gates of several reservoirs, including the Iranamadu tank in the north, Nachidua, Kalawiwa and Amparawiwa, were opened as the water levels increased. According to the Disaster Management Centre, nearly 100,000 people, representing some 28,000 in northern province, have been affected by floods. The authorities have evacuated over 80,000 people from 2,483 families to safe locations. The flood victims have been provided with adequate food, clean water, medicine and sanitary facilities. One person has been killed so far due to drowning in Iranamadu, Kilinochichi area, while another person has been injured. Meanwhile, the Meteorology Department said the depression in the Bay of Bengal had influenced the weather system, with showery situations and cloudy skies over the country are expected to continue. China has said that it opposes any country harming its sovereignty in the name of freedom of navigation and overflight after two US B-52 strategic bombers flew near artificial Chinese-built islands in the South China Sea this week. The Pentagon said that the two US bombers were contacted by Chinese ground controllers but continued their mission undeterred. The latest US patrol in the disputed South China Sea occurred in advance of President Barack Obama's visit to the region this week to attend Asia-Pacific summits, where he's expected to reassert Washington's commitment to freedom of navigation and overflight in the area. China claims most of the South China Sea, through which more than $5 trillion in global trade passes every year, and the United States has said it will continue conducting patrols to assure unimpeded passage. Last month, a U.S. warship challenged territorial limits around one of China's man-made islands in the Spratly Archipelago with the so-called Freedom of Navigation Patrol, the most significant U.S. challenge yet to territorial limits China claims around its new islands. China reacted angrily to the patrol. President Obama's first stop will be Manila for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum Summit, at which Chinese President Xi Jinping will also be present. The US president will then go to Kuala Lumpur for ASEAN and East Asia summits.
Welcome back. El Niño's warm currents have brought fish in an unexpected spectrum of shapes and colors from Mexican waters to the ocean off California's coast, thrilling scientists with the sight of bright tropical species and giving anglers the chance of a once-in-a-lifetime big catch. Hong Kong's first ever locally assembled aircraft has made its maiden flight over the weekend. In East China, a landslide killed 4 and wounded 1 villager while burying over 20 houses. In central China, a man who eats 2 kilos of chili a day is gaining popular attention. And also in China, hundreds of kite enthusiasts take part in a kite festival. Kartini Knox has these details and more. Stay tuned.
El Niño's warm currents have brought fish in an unexpected spectrum of shapes and colors from Mexican waters to the ocean off California's coast, thrilling scientists with the sight of bright tropical species and giving anglers the chance of a once-in-a-lifetime big catch. Scientists say El Niño, a periodic warming of ocean surface temperatures in the eastern and central Pacific, has sent warm waves to California's coastal waters that make them more hospitable to fish from the tropics. Many hammerhead sharks also cruised into California waters because of El Nino, experts say, and behavioral changes have been observed in white sharks, Chris Lowe of California State University Long Beach said. In 1997 to 98, a big El Nino and a duplication of what happened then is happening now too, said Rick Feeney, a fish expert at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. Even as marine biologists up and down the coast gleefully alert one another to each new, rare sighting, the arrival of large numbers of big fish, such as wahoo and yellowtail, has also invigorated California's saltwater sport fishing industry, which generates an estimated $1.8 billion a year. Before the El Nino, California anglers only saw wahoo, a fish with a beak-like snout and a slim body that often measures more than 5 feet or 1.5 meters in length, when they made boat trips south to Mexican waters. This year, there were 256 recorded catches of wahoo by sport fishing party boats from Southern California, with almost all of those being taken on the U.S. side of the border, said Chad Woods, founder of the tracking company SportFishingReport.com. Some species of fish have made a different journey moving north because the waters of Southern California are too warm. The normal stocks of anchovies and sardines have moved on, and a lot of the seal populations and sea lion populations, pups are starving because the mothers can't find enough food. That might be one of the effects of El Nino, Feeney said. Researchers say the northern migration of fish in the Pacific Ocean has been one of the most dynamic effects of the climate phenomenon. Whether it becomes a permanent change remains to be seen. It's a new chapter in Hong Kong's aviation history. Hong Kong's first ever locally assembled aircraft has made its maiden flight over the weekend. The RV-8 single-engine airplane took off for the first time at Hong Kong's international airport. The project was started by local pilot Hank Cheng, and it's the first aircraft that's been assembled, registered and certified in Hong Kong. Over the past 7 years, Cheng collaborated with a group of engineers, pilots, as well as hundreds of secondary school students to make his dream a reality. Cheng says the plane took twice as long as originally expected to complete because he was the first to attempt such a feat and there wasn't much technical support around. But with this project, he wanted to show it's possible to complete such an achievement with limited resources. The pilot added that he decided to involve secondary school students in the project because he hopes to inspire them to develop their passion. This student says she learnt a lot from the project and is happy to see the plane take to the air. The $1.5 million plane can fly for a maximum of 400 nautical miles, which is the distance between Hong Kong and Taiwan. It is hoped that the aircraft will begin traversing the globe next summer. The death toll from a landslide triggered by flooding in China has risen to 25, with 12 more people missing. The avalanche of mud and rock caused by torrential rains engulfed 27 homes in Lishui in the eastern province of Zhejiang. Only one person among the 38 people inside the houses when the landslide struck escaped. The landslide cut off power, damaged electricity circuits, and set some houses on fire. More than 2,300 rescuers and more than 60 digging machines were mobilized to search for people buried alive. The local meteorological department forecast more rain for several days, warning of a risk of further landslides and crop damage. Secondary landslides have also occurred following the disaster, making the rescue work even more difficult. More than 20 houses were buried as the landslides occurred in a geological hazard spot and on a very large scale. The Changchun-Shenzhen Highway, an important highway leading from the northeast to the south of China, has been closed following the disaster. A 54-year-old man in central China, Li Yangzi, eats about 2 kilos of chili a day. He eats dried chilies, fresh chilies, and eats chilies with his meals. And in the morning, as he brushes his teeth, in his mouth are chilies. In fact, the retired migrant worker said that he can't imagine life without eating chilies. He said if he had no chilies or spicy food, then he couldn't be happy. He added that he can have no meat, no eggs or vegetables, or anything at all, and he is fine, but he can't survive without chilies. Once a construction worker, Li gave it all up when he discovered he could make money eating chilies. Now a professional, he appears on television shows, commercials, and at chili eating contests. His daughter-in-law says he simply loves to eat chilies. It's like some sort of snack He really likes to eat them. But is it healthy? One doctor says he appears to be just fine. He can take it. He's always eating them. Lee says he eats on average about 2 kilos of chilies a day. And finally tonight, bright, colourful kites filled the winter sky in Dishili village of North China's Hebei province during the first Dishili Kite Cultural Festival this week. Hundreds of kite enthusiasts, mainly from Beijing, Tianjin and Hebei province, took part in the festival. Visitors witnessed a number of giant kites at the festival. One such kite, named Chinese Dream, had a surface area of 188 square meters, while another dragon-shaped kite was 120 meters long and required around 7 or 8 people to control its movement against strong. Located in Langfang City, Dishili village has become the second largest kite manufacturing base after Weifang City in East China's Shandong province. Kite making and flying became popular in the late 19th and early 20th century.
Well, that's it for this week's Primetime Asia. We'll be back at the same time next week with more news and features from the Asia-Pacific region. For more news, you can visit our website at www.rtbnews.rtb.gov.bn. I'm Alini Jaini, wishing you a good week ahead and good night in the meantime. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.